Oh
Our
yeah.
winner of Lisa's Mean Poll is actively listening and asking thoughtful questions. And who were our others? And can you tell us what? Yes, Rocky, what would yours be?
Um, those are all qualities of what I would say is the most important thing is that you have to be selfless. That's the most important thing in mentoring other people is you have to have their best interest and your goal has to be
Yes.
about them. So all those things go into that, but I think when you sum it up, it's your motivation.
Yep. That's a really good point. And who was our other?
That was me, and I think I had the exact same thought as Rocky. It's intent, right? Like if you're going to mentor someone, then the intent should be that you want to help them. It can't be a ego or a power trip or whatever.
Perfect. Well, and that's all the polls for today. So thank you. And Matt, you got all three
I
screenshots?
just threw one over the fence for three. I think Matt got one and two.
Perfect.
The dark mode versus light mode. Matt and Sean. See the screenshots.
We learn a lot about people, don't we? So, for those of you that joined us when Dan Turchin did his amazing presentation about AI, one of the things that he's trying to socialize, I guess, is this AI transparency pledge. So, I was very happy to throw this logo up because we absolutely did. We knew what we wanted the topic to be. I went into, as I call my chat GPT Gwen, went into Gwen and she built the presentation for us. So let's get started. Let me hold on.
So
Oh
the whole thing was built
no.
by AI. That's what you're saying, Lisa.
And the final slide I built by myself, and it took as long to build the one slide as it took Gwen to build all the rest of them.
Yep.
But still, it was a huge time saver.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of rabbit holes I fell down as I was researching, so it took a little bit. I'm not just gonna, like the rest of you guys, I'm not just throwing something in AI and then not enhancing, fixing whatever word you want to put there.
There we go.
Uh, okay.
In other words, there was human verification.
Yes.
A
I would
human in the
go,
middle.
what's a word even stronger than verification?
Oversight.
Yeah.
Oversight
Okay.
and enhancement, right?
My governance team, me, myself, and I. Okay, so today
It's a harder thing to do once you get past the once you get past this use case. It's a much more difficult thing to do with humans in the loop, however you want to call it, because human oversight assumes we can recognize difference, and we cannot often recognize minor drift in the model. Will never see it. So there's no way to do oversight of something you don't recognize.
So true. So
sometimes we want a major drift.
Well, by the time you get major drift, you've had 10 minor drifts that you didn't see coming. And the emergent 11th trait has all types of other ramifications that you don't understand all the elements of building because it's nonlinear. So it's a fun thing.
I do have a question for you. You don't have to answer
sir.
right now, but I'd be curious to know your level of satisfaction with the outcome and fulfillment of actually putting it together versus letting AI do it for you. Whole different conversation. All I'm presenting and that whole process, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that later.
Absolutely. Well, we'll probably have time at the end, so I'd be happy to talk about that because I have strong thoughts about it, actually. Okay, so this is really straight out of Gwen, although I had to prompt in work to get a good tagline, and I love the little tagline Gwen and I came up with: mentoring, the legacy system that still scales beautifully, because I think that's very true. So 84% of the Fortune 5s have formal mentoring programs, and a lot of what was originally produced for me was kind of around those corporate programs, but that's not really what Sean and I want to talk about today. So, I mean, you guys can all read, but this is sort of why mentoring matters. And I think this list, had I created this list myself from scratch, it would differ some, but a lot of it, is pretty standard. So where I fell down the rabbit hole was learning about some successful corporate mentoring programs. And like Randstad says that they have improved retention by 49% for people that are in the like formal mentoring programs. That's, for a staffing company, and that's meaningful for any company, but for a staffing company, I think even that much more so. So there's if you're interested in corporate mentoring, there's a lot of really interesting articles and stats and et cetera. But again, not really what we're here to talk about today. So, as we talked about it, I think when most people here think of mentoring, it's in the very traditional top-down mentoring approach. And we think that, Sean and I think that that's good, but it's only a small piece of the puzzle. So there are 3 known mentoring ecosystem models. And Sean, if you wanna walk us through these?
Yeah, happily, and thank you. There's the traditional mentoring that everybody thinks of and knows so well, that idea of, Obi-Wan and Yoda, right? Like it's that angle that is so caricaturized, it's almost just expected and assumed. But even that can have some context that I hope when we hit the discussion, particularly with some of the stuff that David Barrow has set up in the UK, we'll have some more discussion about and building those programs that in a way that works and supports things. But the other 2 that we really kind of wanted to dive into a little bit more was the reverse mentoring and the reverse mentoring, and what I refer to as a board of mentors. So when talking about reverse mentoring, one of the things, and again, some of these were things that when Lisa and I were talking about, she was pulling stats and information that were kind of fascinating. When we think about reverse mentoring, it's exactly what you imagine. The somewhat more junior people giving guidance to the more senior people, and or the senior people referring to or asking for that guidance from folks that are newer to the organization. Now, to that end, one of the stats that Lisa pulled up that I thought was really fascinating was that it increases things like retention for junior members by like 90+%. And the reference there is Mellon's Pershing unit. So that's one of those that Lisa or I can kind of steer you towards for more information. But in terms of what reverse mentoring is, or why we think about reverse mentoring, one of the things that I do want to jump up and down about on this, or feel strongly about this, is one of the first things that has to happen on the part of the reverse mentee. There would be those people with the more experience in the field, is the mindset shift that has to occur before doing that. It's so hard for us, and it is fascinating. Anu, who's on the call, had a post in LinkedIn referring to, we tend to have these mindset shifts of like static. We assume things are the way they are so much that even people trying to change their perspective have to actually work at it. So, from my mind, when we go into reverse mentoring, the person being mentored, the person with the experience in that field, who's inquiring of, asking for, and looking for guidance from the newer person in the reverse mentor situation, really has to change their frame set. And it's one of the things that I found for me is so interesting, realizing that when I talk to someone who has less experience in my field, in my company, or in any of those, I have an opportunity there to gain insight and knowledge that I wouldn't ordinarily get. And whether it's getting that from an organization or asking my daughters to teach me to use better words so that I'm not as on fleek as I think I am. Or getting on slightly more on target. It's that changing your perspective from looking to reverse mentoring to getting insight, to realizing that you are, and the way I think of this, I truly do in so many cases, like I channel my inner Sherlock. Before I go into the room to do a reverse mentoring situation, or before I go into the room to do a workshop situation, I try to imagine that I'm that person that has amazing insights. And then I'm going into the room to notice the things that other people don't. And when I do that, and I move into a reverse mentoring situation, it makes me inquisitive and it makes me ask the questions that don't come from the I'm talking down to you, but more, hey, tell me about this or help me understand, which I think is so important in actually turning the term reverse mentoring into an actual thing in running reverse mentoring. So, the other pieces that they talked about in terms of where reverse mentoring is, and this was stuff that Lisa got from Gwen, was the idea that using reverse mentoring builds the empathy and inclusivity that helps keep junior members engaged, but it also helps keep leadership and strategic decisions current, and potentially gives them insights that they wouldn't have without it, because it brings innovation. It does kind of get to, and I think Lisa, you pointed this, the idea about part of making that happen requires that kind of voluntary participation. And like I said, to that, the leaders being mentored have to have the mindset shift first. And they have to literally maybe take that minute outside the room to go, okay, I'm going into this not to tell others, but to listen to and see what I can gain from others. And now I'm the super sleuthy spy that's going to have the insights from talking to these people. So that's what I wanted to add on reverse mentoring. Lisa, anything I missed or anything you want to add to this?
Well, it's almost a little bit off topic, but I will say that reverse mentoring, these concepts where they can be easily applied is, you know, for employees who are doing the review process to think, are there questions here in our standard review that allow the team member to provide feedback about what could be improved? You know, so like for the academy, we're going to be 22 years in January. And our, you know, that's a long time. And so we've been doing the same thing for a really long time. And I love when we bring in new people because they're like, why do we do it like this? And the rest of us all just do it rote because we've done it that way for so long. So I think from this perspective, really looking at the next time you're doing any kind of review, what can you learn to improve? Are you asking those questions? Because traditionally, HR driven reviews aren't really asking those questions. So that's my thought on that. Sean, and I'll take us to the peer mentoring.
Before we do that, I got to throw Sherry, Ray, you had raised your hand with something. Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
yeah, you know, it's interesting and listen to you talk about reverse mentoring. I would think that the culture ultimately that you're building using reverse mentoring is really a culture of sharing, right? And it literally breeds collaboration. So the benefits beyond the mentoring is literally just, it then becomes part of the culture where every single perspective is welcome and leveraged, and it just becomes it's like a natural evolution. So I think I'd love to see this area a lot more kind of explored because I think the bigger benefits down the road culturally are huge.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think it's not to throw that weird DEI word around, but it helps break those things open to opportunities. There's another hand up, and sir, I don't know. I don't want to call you V. Howden, so I got to
It's
ask.
Valence. Valence
Balance.
Howden.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. Maybe 2 points there as I sort of think that out as well. And maybe to Sherry's point, sorry, the organization always has to be open to doing it, and the leaders have to actually care to do it. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people who say they care to do it who really don't, who go through performative actions on doing it who really don't, because the result is very different than the perception that they do these things. And I see
Mhm.
that a lot in governance and a lot in leadership where it's a performative art like values are. I say I do
Oh,
it, but put me under duress, and what I get is nothing like that. I'm never really going to use that information. I really don't care, but I've been told it should look this way. So I'd like to see it be real and not be performative art.
yeah.
So the mindset shift has to be a real one. And I would say because powerful people retaliate, they don't resist it, they don't do it, they do things to make it harder and harder to actually incorporate it. And the one thing I always say about DEI is break it out. When you're talking about it, it's diversity, it's equity, it's inclusion. It's easy to attack an acronym. It's harder to attack the words. So don't use the acronym, use the words. And people have to explain why they don't like equity, why they don't want to include people, why they don't want to be diverse. Those turning it into acronym makes it very easy to dismiss. So use
Okay.
the words make it a lot harder for people to actually explain away.
Hell
I
yeah.
love that. Okay. And Valence, I appreciate it. That's one of those notes I want to take to file into my angle on that. And I think to your point, and I think this is the last thing I'd mention to this piece with reverse mentoring in terms of the culture that both of you are talking about building. It has to be recognized as well as a practice. And in the concepts of equity and inclusion, it's one of the things that Mr. Barra and I have talked about in the past as well. And yeah, not to put too fine a point on it, but for some of us that come from all of those standards and privileges that kind of are assumed or built to or built with, that means it has to be a practice that we have to continue to work on. And I totally get what you're saying about in some cultures it's played, not reeled. But the thing that I wonder or hope for is that by making it recognized as a practice that it's something you're always getting better at, that potentially some of those places where it's play acted may eventually be, that fake it till you make it roll.
Mhm.
Then I hope that we could get to that point.
The only thing
Man,
I'd
I
say
love
there
it.
is
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
the only thing I would say there is if people want to actually embed in the organization, they have to change the measurement of success for people. So
Mm,
collaboration and mentoring is something that we reinforce. A lot of people's performance metrics don't reinforce helping people.
yep.
And so it will be performative because that's not what they're measured on. They're
That's a
measured on
really good point too.
individualistic things. So if you want to change it, you have to people behave the way they're measured very
Yeah.
much. And if the measurement does not support doing this, it will be play acting.
So
Very
when are
true.
you going to be coming in and doing your 2020, sir?
Yeah.
Because you
Anytime you
you
want me
have
to.
things to share.
Yeah.
I just did a webinar on mentorship like last week.
Oh,
So
did you
mentorship
really?
This
in
was
the new world, yeah.
this was
Uh,
the thing I felt kind of bad about. Lisa and I jumped on this piece, and Mr. Barra launching a organization wide or outside his own organization on mentoring in the UK. And you doing this, I'm like, I want us to get past the content and get to the conversation piece because I think there's a lot to share. I do want to put a pencil in the mark of personally using the idea of not using DEI but bringing out equity and inclusion and calling those out because I think that's brilliant, which is the reason I'm restating it is to lock it into my own brain, but also
Yes.
to talk about measurement. Because that idea of what we measure and putting in building out measurements would be a great conversation in the other part of the 2020 to get to what do we measure that incents that, which would be cool. Simone, you had one other thing, and then I got to go to peer
Yeah,
mentoring.
no, it because we're actually specifically on that topic of where we're at in your deck. In the old days, I don't know how many of you remember filling in a 360 feedback form. Because when you talk about reverse mentoring, that was actually part of an attempt to do reverse mentoring in a way.
Yeah.
Feeding back on your managers or your team leaders and them sitting down and saying, oh, I didn't realize you saw me in that light, and things
Yeah.
like that. So I just want to remind people that there are a lot of things that we've done in the past that were, I guess, not necessarily aimed at that, but we're trying to have a pathway to reverse mentoring. And
Agreed.
it just didn't quite work the way we thought it would. But I think there's still elements in things like 360-degree reviews that can actually be brought in. I think there's still some positives in that, in the way in which this could become a cultural thing, because 360s did die out.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I will say in my own organization, we still have 360 reviews in some of those pieces. But I think the underlying piece that I would pin on reverse mentoring before we hop to the next is just the idea that underneath, regardless of what measure or what process we put in play, and it's the same thing with the idea that I was talking about to get into a reverse mentoring situation, you have to change your mindset. And regardless of what measures we use or what processes we put in place to drive it, without the underlying heart or intent, it's always going to turn itself into a warped version. So I think that aspect is driving some ways to inculturate that heart or intent. and to keep feeding that heart or intent of there's incredible opportunity out of it. It gives us a baseline for innovation and growth and all of those. And speaking to those qualitative components will help drive the keeping the process stuff moving, I hope. To that end, and I think it's really cool, we're hitting a conversation piece already before we go through. So I want to jump to that. But I'm going to ask Lisa to put us into the last angle on the mentoring. So we have the classic mentoring, then we have the reverse mentoring and the angles behind it and the values to it. But the other is peer mentoring. And again, my desire to jump up and down on this, and the reason I got passionate about this was I got involved in both of these things, both the reverse mentoring angle and the peer mentoring angle, from a lived experience perspective. And one of the things that kind of set a light bulb off on my head, and I'll give credit where it's due. One of our leaders and within ServiceNow, who has since moved on and doing great things, put out this idea of a board of mentors, and it kind of made the head go. Because if we have a single mentor and we follow a single mentor, then we're going to very likely follow in that one individual's footsteps and be, if we did it exactly perfectly, exactly like them. On the other hand, the idea of looking at peer mentoring or looking across a board of mentoring is looking and going, do we really want to be exactly a copy of any one person? Or do we want to grow to be somebody that's our own self, but pulling the skills from different people? So she proposed this idea of a board of mentors. This isn't new. This has actually been floating around in the ecosystem from, I believe, a Harvard Business Review article from a dozen years ago or more. But doing a self-evaluation and seeing what skills you want to grow, and then determining what people do you know that know those skills that you're either the weakest in or are you could grow from talking to them. And building that board, just like you would a board of directors for people that are more skilled in those pieces or might give you that feedback, and then scheduling like a true and real program around that, I think have been huge. I started on that path about 3 years ago, and many of the people in this room know because I called them and I said, "Hey, do you mind me calling you for a little bit of information or a little bit of insight on," he says with a long eyebrow to Lisa, business or entrepreneurial ideas, or how do I grow the getting my name out there? He says with a long eyebrow to Matt. But building those questions actually builds out a board of people who are expert in skills you want to grow. Now, one of the last conversations as Lisa and I were prepping this content yesterday was talking about this is one of the areas that AI could be great in. Using AI to give an evaluation of you and or by prompting it correctly, skills that you want to grow is a great starting point. But then finding those people to put on your board to schedule regular meetings and check-ins to how are those skills going or how are you driving this thing is kind of the whole idea of peer mentorship or board mentoring. I have had a board of mentors for a couple of years now. I've changed board members over time. And unfortunately, kind of dropped out of the regular plan. My regular board of mentors was to call them on the quarter. But I think that is a different model than we're used to seeing of having a single mentor. Yes, sir, Balance.
Yeah, the only thing I'm always cautious is using AI where it has an emotional aspect to it. It doesn't do emotion well, it doesn't do context well, it doesn't handle tone. So when
True.
it looks at things, it doesn't have the ability to add human context to what it pushes out. And I will also say, one of my colleagues said, if you want to see the accuracy of how AI looks at things, have it summarize and do a bio of you and
Yes.
look for what's true and what's inconsistent. And I will tell you, the first thing it said about me was, she is very good at. Um, so I'm not
Interesting.
buying it fully because if you can't even figure out gender in certain aspects of my role, and one of my colleagues, someone we all know, which is Patty Blackstaff, it actually credited her with 2 books she never wrote.
Oh,
So,
Wow.
so she really likes it.
That's a
so it is missing things that are fundamental and clear. So using it for human elements without having the ability to vet it effectively is not necessarily meaning it's going to push you down the right direction.
yeah.
I'm really, really careful with what mentoring looks like in a world where AI is moving.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. And it's one I should have qualified when I mentioned the idea of using AI is in any of those cases, a little like the AI pledge. I always use that as my starting point. And it's one of the conversations I've had. Like I always am reviewing, and when Lisa put this together and we were reviewing it, one of the things to me that I thought was most useful about the way that you view leveraging AI is as a starting point, but with your own internal uh, register to
Mm.
review and go, yeah, these things, okay. Hopefully, I think those things may give you insights that you hadn't looked at, but even if they give you insights that you look at and you go, well, this is wrong. But it's still that's the part where I think that that balance of value and disproportionate danger
Yeah.
fit in. It's like it
Mhm.
could give you angles you might
It's
not have thought of.
but we also have this assumption we can always recognize what's wrong.
Yeah.
We do not have the
Yeah.
ability to always recognize what's wrong.
Yeah.
So we got to be careful about the assumption we can see it all. We can recognize it all, and we know it when we see it.
Well, and I think that's a great angle for when you look through those initials and you get to that board of mentors. This is one of the first questions I always ask when I go through presentations or deliver anything is go, hey, David's another one who will shake his head at this probably because one of the first things I did after we did our last talk 2 weeks ago was go, hey, how did I do? But what are some things that I might have missed? Or what are some things I'm not catching? And again, it's back to like we said with reverse mentoring, that peer mindset of I have to set my brain to be open to that feedback or be willing to listen or hear that is almost something you have to do first before you get mentored of any kind. I see though, John, you've got a hand up, and I know I want to get to those last. Flip it back to Lisa for those last
Oh,
couple
you can keep
slides.
going if
Apologies.
you want. Keep going. I can do it later.
No, go ahead. What's your question, sir?
Well, I'm
I'm
kind of
done.
suspicious of formal mentoring programs. To me, a mentor, the most important part of a mentor is trust, and that that you can't artificially say introduce someone as
Mhm.
your mentor. You just met him 5 minutes ago. That's so
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever been formally part of a mentoring program. I've had plenty of mentors, but that has evolved organically. So I'm suspicious of formal mentoring programs.
Yeah.
It seems kind of artificial to me.
Interesting.
And
Well, and
Yeah,
that puts
John.
us in a great spot to head towards the last couple of slides and conversation that we're leading towards.
Yeah,
Um,
John. I've seen it work. Where so I've been a member of a couple of these where I had a mentor, and it was board driven, just like this. At multiple companies I've been at, and what we did was they brought us all together. We had this like offsite thing, and we did a lot of like company culture coaching and these type of things. And then through that, you sort of found people that you connected with and that had the skills and stuff, and they put their whole like profile and resume, and so you sort of got to pick. You didn't just say, hey, you've been assigned John and
Mhm.
he's your mentor.
Yeah,
We went
okay.
and we were like, you know what, that John guy, he's got some really good things to say. I love the way he carries himself in this or handles these situations. I want to be more like John. I want to learn from John or whatever the case would be, and you would
Yeah,
go
that
connect
makes
with
more
them.
sense to me.
yeah. Well, and mentorship doesn't have to be, and we're having some great conversation on that in the chat. I want to ask Lisa, do you mind? I'm going to flip it back over to you to push to those last two slides because I think they've got huge value in terms of exactly what we're talking about. How do I make mentorship work, whichever of the different variations I'm using that'll be successful? And if we do, what are the if we could take takeaways from this, what would they be?
Yeah, so this board mentoring explained, boy, it just occurred to me, obviously not in a formal way, but what I learned this morning that I'm going to start saying out the words diversity. So
Yeah.
that to me is just and it really occurred to me because I'm always like I love these Friday meetings so much, and I always say I feel sorry for everybody who's in service management that doesn't come to these meetings, and that I realize that's really a big piece of the reason why. And then so that these key success factors, again, straight out of the box, if you will, none of them were I think these are I think these apply whether you're going to kind of try to build an individual one-on-one mentorship. Because what I've taken from this experience is I have been a mentee and a mentor, but very informally. And the next time, and I traditionally have helped younger women in technology. And so the next time that I and I found myself in those relationships. So the next time I find myself in that relationship, I'm going to put a little bit more structure around what we do, because without that structure, the cadence falls off. So I'm really excited about sort of finding my next person that I want to help grow her career. And I'm going to take a lot of what we got here to that. And then this is the slide it took me longer to make than it took Glenn to make the whole rest of it. But so this is what I pulled out as the best advice for me. And I hope you guys also agree that it's useful, but you got to know what the purpose is, because I'm going to mentor you to do what, to learn to be more confident, to whatever that is. I think there are people in the wild. Sean McClean is and always has been great at this. But people that you admire, and I think this group is this is a great wild atmosphere here, but to just reach out to people and start with 15 minutes. You have time to have a coffee. Then make the ask. Add some light structure around it, which really, I don't know what that's going to look like yet. But as I said, the next time I move into a mentoring role, I'm really going to add some structure around it. If I have any success with that, I'll keep you guys posted. And as a mentee, and this is for a mentor as well, but come in, be ready for it. Ask for advice. Be open to the advice. Be willing to take away homework, if you will. And then, of course, pay it forward. So that concludes today's slide deck. But we have so much good stuff in chat and so many questions.